This podcast was recorded on the very last day of 2017, December 31st. But by the time you hear it, things may have changed. Welcome to Black Women Talk Politics. I'm Sheila Strain Clark.
I'm Sabria Williams.
And here we are on New Year's Eve.
2018 is about to be here.
I know, in less than 9 hours, we're going to be breaking into the new year.
And so I'm excited because that means we have some midterm elections. We can turn some stuff around.
Yeah, that's true. I always get excited. You know, the start of a new year, it's like new beginnings, fresh start. You know, it's just all things hopeful. I really feel like 2018 is going to be an awesome year.
I certainly hope so, because 2017 was a shit show. At least politically speaking. And what we were talking about, it was, except for towards the end, I feel like we had some
little sparks of hope.
We had some sparks of hope, but starting out and in the middle, it was murky as hell. It was, not hopeless, but that's why we're here, right? That's what sparked us to do this
podcast. That's true, yeah.
Because it started off like, what?
But it was just never a dull moment. You can't say 2017 was boring because it was constantly full of, events and ridiculousness and fodder and foolishness.
And so so start us off. We're going to do our...
okay, so this is a New Year's Eve show. It's only right that we do the best of, right? So we're going to do...
Best, worst, we're gonna do, just of.
Right, Black Women Talk Politics, best of 2017, or like you said, best of, worst of. We'll call them monumentous occasions in 2017 with our Black Women Talk Politics spin on it. Okay, of course we're going to have some of the top headlines, but we're also going to have some headlines and events that were really particular to the communities of color and to women. So we'll mix it up a bit, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, I think so, and all these things, I guess we should say, they're in no particular order. No. There's no ranking here. There's no bracket here. These are all things that, we went through our own list, which each one of us had a list, that was probably, at least 50 things long. And we did this filtering and brokering, and we came down to 10 or 11, right?
Right.
All right. So what should we talk about first, Bruce?
So we can start off with the Women's March, which happened the day after Donald Trump's inauguration, and it was a better showing than his inauguration, no matter what his people tell you. But it
unlike what Sean Spicer said, right. He said this is the biggest inauguration ever,
and it wasn't. But the Women's March, I feel like it was so big because of and in spite of, right? It had such an impact because he was in office, because we have this misogynistic sexual person who's been accused of sexual assault,
sexual
predator in office, and we said no. We said no more. We said, how dare you, United States of America, put this man in office? And I believe that we have been marching since the 21st, and we are continuing to march, and it's come full circle, and we'll hit it at the end with what's happening now and how women are standing up, and we're saying no more. But we started saying no more on January 21st, 2017, and it was a wonderful showing, and it was of solidarity, and just, even though Hillary didn't win, it was, we will not be silenced. We will not be pushed, to the back of the room anymore. We are here, and we want to be heard.
I think being at that march was really cool. First of all the little pink hats, the little pink pussy hats. That was the funniest thing ever, right? All the pussycat hats and the ears and all of that. And
I did not go to that march.
Oh, really?
My daughter had a gymnastics meet, and we had planned to go there, and I didn't realize how big it was going to be. So however, my son and my husband represented us there, and
Yeah.
they were there. So that, but I did not realize how, in the moment it was going to be. I did, but I had I had my daughter, my little woman that I was representing, and I was with her. However, on the 21st, on the 20th of January 2018, I will be there.
Well,
Because we're doing it again.
Yeah, I went. It's one of those things where I wasn't going to go, to be honest. I had to work that day. And as I was getting off, it was about 11 o'clock that morning, and I'm around Pennsylvania Avenue, and I just see all these people.
You can't not go,
and
right?
And actually, it was 500,000 people that came to DC, and they said it was between 3 and 5 million people across the world that participated. And so, really, on a whim, I just parked my car, got out, and started walking.
Yeah.
And I was really, really glad that I did. The Women's March was incredible. It was an awesome way to have this counter message to what many of us were, very outraged when in terms of what the Trump presidency represented. You had this counter message by millions of women and people. And then it wasn't just women who were at this march, it was a lot of men who were at the march.
Yeah, my son and my husband.
So it was awesome. And to kick off 2017 with this, hey, we will not be silenced. We're not going to get down with this. We have a whole counter resistance, and then everyone was #resist the resistance, and
that's what started.
And who would have known we would have had a podcast,
Right, but we were.
But I never got one of those hats, so I'm gonna have.
I'll get you one.
Okay,
I know a woman.
I definitely need a pink
I'm gonna have
hat
one
for the next time.
But yeah, you're right. Resistance was born of Donald Trump and his and who he is, and I'm excited that we are still there, and I feel like the momentum has not waned, and we're still working towards transparency. We're working towards equality, and we're working towards just being civil to each other, no matter what he says, no matter who he is or what he does or his administration. We are not going to be the arrogant American that is in office.
Right. So, after, so the Women's March was a huge thing, definitely, for this year. I think another major thing, I guess we are kind of going in a sequential order in terms of that was January. Right. So, very shortly thereafter, we had the travel ban, right?
Muslim ban.
So I
call it a Muslim ban.
That was to me one of the second big public acts of resistance
Major.
That we saw.
We shut down airports. Dulles, SFO was shut down. I mean, you had immigration lawyers rushing to airports to immediately protect people who are leaving atrocious situations, only to get here and be told, no, you can't come here. I mean, these are women who are nursing babies. Who, I mean, from an immigration attorney that I know. And have been. I was doing a program with IUTA, and it's an organization that only helps. They provide legal assistance to immigrants, and what we don't know is that immigrants have to, unless you can pay for an attorney, you don't get an attorney. It's not like when you're here and it's like, oh, well, if you go, an attorney will be provided for you, even if they suck. No, you must defend yourself. So you are trying to defend yourself with a language barrier. You are hungry. You have children. Because most of these women that they are most of the people that they are banning, again, are women coming into the country. They're largely not men. They're women with children. And so another assault against women, which I feel like, which is why the momentum was still so heavy going from the Women's March to the travel ban, because people who know, the dog whistle words, you knew that this was going to affect women far more disproportionately than it would ever affect men. And then the countries that were represented, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. I mean, none of those countries have ever had a terrorist. We've never had a terrorist from any of those countries at that time when the Muslim ban was enacted, had done anything towards the United States. They had not done any. There's no one born in those countries had done an act of terror. Not one of the 9/11 terrorists. Nothing. And so this was just a ploy by Donald Trump to again be racist and be sexist and hateful, and it didn't work. at that time, and it's not working now. Parts of it I feel like have been enacted, but a large part large parts have not. So I feel like this is something that we still continue to work on.
Well, definitely, because it's just, the Supreme Court in December allowed part of the travel ban to take effect. So they keep pushing for this travel ban to have legs, and I think you have to have the counter resistance, which the resistance, which is basically saying, hey, this is illegal, it's unlawful. Think of all the people that were stuck in limbo when the travel ban went on because they didn't really know if they were going to be able to come back in. At first they were saying if you have a green card, you're not going to be admitted back in.
It was foolishness.
It's a lot of confusion. But I think, in terms of why it tops 2017 for me, on top of the fact that it's just ridiculous, to put together a ban based on someone's religious, our country's religious prevalence, is just how we saw people in airports, people everywhere protesting, signs
band
everywhere,
together.
Just, it was this big, again, it continued to show that as much as there's this effort to, block out certain cultures and communities from our country, there's this whole other effort of folks that are like, no, we're not having
being
it.
inclusive.
Right. So, I think the travel ban, it definitely is something to keep watching for.
And I feel like that was, after the travel ban that was my first protest. That was the first time I protested with my daughter. We did go out. She did not have a gymnastics meet. And we protested. And I felt like that was, again, the start of many protests, many marches that because the Women's March was planned and it was something that we knew was happening. The Muslim ban marches were spontaneous. I found out on a Saturday that we were going to be out there on Sunday, and there were droves and droves of people. And it was, I feel like those are things that how we can be heard. Those are how we can be seen. If we, ideally, if I had my way, every Wednesday afternoon we could stop traffic on Pennsylvania Avenue with a march, because there was always something, right? There was always something more disgusting than the next thing that we could be marching for. And I feel like that is a way to have our voices be heard, and by just with our movements and our signs. And it was, so I don't know. We'll watch the travel ban and see how this circus continues to unfold.
Well, speaking of a circus, I think one of the top, I don't know, what do they call the things, the main acts?
What is it, the big tent? Is that what's
the big tent show, I think, had to be Comey being fired and the Mueller investigation.
Right, because that was the trickle down. That was the snowball that started out as a little snowball, and now it's a boulder. It's running down the hill, right?
So Comey, who was like the president's best friend when he was running for election, because Comey felt this need to talk about the emails that were found from Hillary Clinton and everything, and then once he got in office and there was all this, sights were turned to Russian interference in the election, then all of a sudden it was time for Comey to go. And
well, it was time for him to go because they had that dinner where Comey was asked pretty straightforwardly by the president, hey, can you stop looking into this?
Right. He said, I hope you can let this go.
I hope you can let this go.
The dude was like, no, I'm not sure.
That's not my job. And so then he gets fired, which is why, because he fired him, which is why I honestly believe that we even have this Mueller investigation, because then that's when you sort of stuck out. Like, oh, I'm going to fire the guy after I told him not to do something, and he told me, no, it's against the law if I don't. You're like, well, you go.
Yeah, his firing was kind of unprecedented because he was only at the very beginning of his term. He was supposed to have this 10-year term, and he was like, he still had 7 years left or so. And then they fired him, and then it was really pretty obvious that the whole rationale was pretty much fabricated, because Trump said he's taking the recommendation of basically Rod Rosenstein, who was his subordinate. So when does your subordinate get to recommend that you get fired? That's quite out of line, And so, and also, of course, because Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself.
So that's also
well, for lying, So
he's still lying.
So they're having Comey get fired, and then having Mueller
step in.
Right. Well, he becomes the special counsel to look into the Russia inquiry and Russia meddling. And now, of course, as we've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks, now Mueller's under the gun. Mueller is a bad guy. Mueller's got to go.
Which is so asinine. So you're only a bad guy if you're against Donald Trump.
Well, he
Color
just
me
wants
bad
this
guy.
whole right. He just wants this whole thing to go. Well, the thing that I found so interesting about Comey, though, is that he just went on. He's on like the circuit now, right? Like I have a couple of. Like we know he went to Howard, right? He also went to American University. He's been speaking to students. They say he has a book deal coming out.
Of course he does.
There's some rumblings that maybe this guy might actually try to run for an elected official.
Oh God.
So, he's like, hey, I guess he's the honest Abe of
Right.
of 2017
I mean,
or
but
something.
also,
I don't know.
these are Mueller, Comey, they're Republican guys too. So it's really odd that it's even. I mean, and when you're in these positions, no matter what your party affiliation, because your role is, and this is what Donald Trump misses daily, is that you are bipartisan. You are president of the United States. They are representing the United States in their role. So Mueller wants to get the information that is right for the United States, not for the president, because that's not how this country works. Somebody needs to continue to tell Donald Trump that still today, forever, because he is only about who's in his pocket, who he can turn, and who has these loyalties to him. When it's not about him, it's about country, and that it's for him. It's never been about that, and it infuriates me that we're still here. I had no illusions that he would be impeached by this time, but I had thought maybe the United States would have run him off. Like we'd be so incensed that we just lay down on Pennsylvania Avenue daily and just make it so nothing could move.
You haven't been following history then,
No. No, I mean, I needed some sort of uprising.
There have been folks way worse than him over the. I know. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe not in our lifetime.
Not in our lifetime. Here,
in
the
slavery
office
was endorsed by the president.
But
of the
we are
United
not
States,
slaves anymore.
Yeah,
we are there. We are in these streets, and we can be in them. That's my thing. Is when we were slaves and we had something, there was something over us. We couldn't, but now we are not.
We've had Klans leaders in the Congress. I mean, Jesse Helms. I mean, you know what I mean. So
But the presidency, you feel like at this point,
you
in
thought it was
2017,
sacred, but it's
no, it's not.
It's not. However, I do think though that many people are appalled by the way that racism and divisiveness is being played by this president, and so
and not just played, but it's being amend. I mean, he is giving voice and light to it, and saying and showing that he is racist and he is homophobic and xenophobic and sexist, and so he's giving a green light to all of these people to come out. And I guess this is a good segue into Charlottesville,
right? Which is number 4.
Number 4
on our top 10 list, if you've been following. So number 1 was the Women's March. Number 2 was travel ban. Number 3 was Comey firing / Mueller investigation. And number 4 is Charlottesville. Charlottesville is just...
It's interesting.
It's interesting because this is Black Women Talk Politics. And of course, as an African-American woman, I have a lens for Charlottesville, but our whole entire country has a lens for Charlottesville. Yeah. It actually hits both lists, which is our what we're calling kind of mainstream top 5, and then Black Women Talk Politics top 5. Yeah. So Charlottesville happened this summer, and we were talking about how all of this was also around the Confederate statues. This thing was brewing as well.
This is not so much about statues. It's about white men believing that their existence is at stake, who they are, how they navigate the world. These scared white men. That's what this is about. And I mean, that's what Charlottesville is about. Jews will not replace us. Who has ever said that we don't want to, nobody wants to replace you. We just want a seat at the table. And so when you are walking it's not about it, you mask it about these statues that you give two shits about. They don't care about the statues. What they're saying is, I will not be replaced. They believe that.
When they basically said that, right?
Jews will not, as if somebody's ever thought we would replace you. Nobody wants to replace you. We just want to be in the room. We want to be heard. We want to have equality, which is what everybody's always said from the beginning. But that's not good enough. Equality is too much for them to give.
So at Charlottesville, when we had on Friday night, we had the young men, about 250 young men with the torches,
Tiki torches,
and inciting kind of visions of old, reminiscent of crosses burning and things like that.
A good old fashioned Klan rally with white nationalists thrown in there and some Nazi folks thrown in there. All of these folks that are right wing folks that are thrown in, that are not just the Ku Klux Klan, your good old fashioned Klan. This is the Klan rally, times 2 or 1,000,000.
Right, and then the next day you had you had the actual protest, and you had the man drive his car into the protesters, and you had Heather Heyer, who was 32, of Charlottesville, lose her life,
murdered,
and 19 others who were injured. And this man plowed into one group and then reversed into another group of people, of human beings. And if you saw some of the images, it was just crazy. You saw the bodies kind of just flipping over on the impact of the vehicle. And so this woman lost her life. And so then we had, basically the White House, who, instead of condemning the march and condemning, there was so, I mean, I will say, there was,
what did he say? That there were bad people on both sides.
Both sides. And that was his culminating statement, and I think that's what disturbed people the most, because at first he came out and he said this wasn't good.
This wasn't good, right?
And people were saying, yeah, you need to go a little bit harder than this wasn't good. So then he came out with this much stronger statement condemning this, that, and the next. And my question, of course, was, why couldn't you just? That was enough to say. You could have just shut up then, but instead,
do you know who we're talking about?
Well, right. There's
the audience,
right. So then on Thursday, there was a press,
in
press
in
conference
Trump
or something, right? And then the reporters were pressing him, and then he said, well, there were good people on both sides, and both sides were to blame. And when
good and bad people on both sides.
When one side kills another side, it's usually a bad side. And a good
Period.
side, because
when you have
Heather Heyer lost her life, and I have to say that I don't think she was to blame. She was just peacefully protesting, and so and
that's the thing. Normalizing this behavior, normalizing the right, this element of the right, where racism is okay, violence and racism is okay, where we're coming back to bring back this good old boy, good old time mentality, where, for instance, you ask like a Ray Moore, when's the best time in America? Well, in slavery. I mean, so that's what these people believe. And so when you are condoning that and this behavior is now accepted from the top, that's why Heather Heyer is dead. That's why she was murdered, because he has given license to these voiceless small people who were always small, and now he's made them feel big. And so they can do things like get tiki torches and walk through the streets of Charlottesville, and the poor people of Charlottesville now have to deal with this.
But we all have to deal with this.
We
all have to deal with this, because it just, it continues to feed into this nationalistic movement that's really against anything that's not,
white.
That just looks like,
white and Christian, straight.
And that's not what our country was built on. Our country was built on diversity and freedom of religion and all types of cultural expression. That's what they said,
but then all of the actions. Don't watch what they say, watch what they do.
Well, I
So
mean,
it's
I
built on that,
think
but
Steve
then,
Bannon
throw in a
and
little
his people,
slavery.
they're no, right. Well, they didn't say that. They didn't sign up for that.
Right.
They're back with the authors of the Declaration of Independence and 3/5 of a man and all that
exactly.
stuff. But anywho, so our fifth thing that we were saying was really cool that we didn't really even get to talk about, because it's been a minute since we've been here, with Alabama, and there was a pinky bet that was made.
Right, and what do I owe you?
Together.
What did I owe you? Because I was so happy I lost that bet.
I don't even know if we had any kind of booty.
Ooh,
that
right.
it was just I guess
But I texted you that night and said, I've never been happier to lose. I've never been happier to lose a bet.
That was a nail-biter, though.
It was. I was so shocked. I had turned it off again because I hate the butterflies in my stomach. That was reminiscent of the 16 in November 16 when I was waiting for the results for the presidency. This was like that for me because this was going to say that, yes, we now are the gutter United States who will have a pedophile in the Senate. That's what it was going to say. And there is no more bottom. There's no bottom once you're allowing people who hurt children to be anywhere with any type of power. There's no bottom. And so we have a bottom and it's now just Donald Trump. And so maybe we can now work our way up because he's still the bottom and Ray Moore isn't the bottom.
But let's just be clear though. It was only like 1 percentage point that separated the two of them.
It was
like 49 to 48.
52% of educated white women, I say educated very loosely, voted for this man.
Yeah, I mean, I think folks just kind of, again, we talked about the ostrich symptom, whatever.
I know what you're saying.
What I'm trying to say is people put their heads in the sand. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they just, so I don't even know. I think people just choose not to deal with things that they don't want to be true. And that's probably what happened here. However.
But also, you know what? I've deduced that there is one county.
That was the word I was trying to say. Syndrome.
There's one county in Alabama that has one of the highest per capita rates of pedophiles living, when you have to be, when you're on the offenders list. So there's one county that has one of the highest in the United States. And Alabama as a whole is pretty high. And so when you think of that, when you think of the culture of that and people who know somebody who's abused as a child or who is an abuser, and that is the culture, and they're thinking, oh, but they're okay because that's your culture, right? That's what you know. It's like sort of in a very, like, everybody in my family has diabetes. So if I get diabetes, and which is another culture for poor and disenfranchised, and where there are health disparities and life disparities. So these people are brought up with pedophilia and thinking that it's better than abortion. Because you know what, everybody, I have a cousin and she's okay. You have to think that this is, because what other rationale? They have to rationalize it. I just think people didn't believe he did it. People know they did it. Again, when you have a place that has this much, a high concentration of pedophiles rolling around, people know he did it. They just are okay with it.
I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to believe that. Maybe I'm the ostrich, but I think that people turn a blind eye or they choose to disbelieve. And I do think that a lot of people do have this sense that, this is better than that. I remember someone saying to me as a kid, well, I'd rather be what they are than be a nigger like you. And I was like, oh my God. Nice. Like, people really believe that, that it's, and so when you hear, I guess it's not shocking potentially that someone would say to themselves, well, this is better than having a Democrat. But like, how sad is that? You know what I mean? That you would compromise,
children and
that's really scary.
But who didn't say it? Black women. They did not. 98% of them rolled and went into the polls and voted Doug Jones. And 96% of African American men did as well. So in Alabama, it was the black vote that helped even though it was close, if the black vote hadn't come out in record numbers, he would not be the Democratic senator from Alabama, which is hopefully a great way in ending the year because he was the last major election.
But I just want to say that Roy Moore did try to challenge everything. He just recently denied him
and said that and actually confirmed Doug Jones as the
so he was still going to give it a go. He was like, listen, there's a mistake here.
Right, the mistake is you.
Yeah. So that was a happy moment.
That was a happy moment. Happy, sad though, because you still have it was still so close.
Right, it was still so close. But considering Alabama hadn't voted for like a Democrat in 25 years, even though it seemed really close, it was like way. He should have won by like 20 points,
And he won because Roy Moore was probably historically one of the worst candidates in the history of having a candidate that you had to run against. So not winning against him would have been horrible. But it was Alabama, so it was possible.
Yeah, it was definitely possible.
So what, then we have, well, I guess sort of still going on, still moving. We have the Me Too movement, which has exposed what I feel like women who go to work or who are just women daily know is that sexual harassment is live and well, and that there are men getting away with it in disgusting and horrific ways, and they're not being held accountable, no matter how much the women go to report it. In fact, largely women are scared to report because they will then be victimized a second time by either being fired or continuing to be harassed or not believed. That's not the case so much. Starting with Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood producer who has had, I feel like I've lost count over the women that have come out, but he's had these prominent actresses, Gwyneth Paltrow, Selma Hayek, and many more come out against him. And since that ball started rolling, now it's come into politics and major corporations, but most notably in politics, Al Franken, the rep from Minnesota, has stepped down because of allegations of inappropriate sexual misconduct with women. I think all of it happened before he was in office, which does not matter. But I say that only to say that we still have the Roy Moores and Donald Trumps who, I guess Donald Trump was before he was in office, but we have several men and representatives that are being accused while they're in office, and they're paying with our tax money. There is a kitty for this. I think we talked about that in one episode. And they're paying these women off. John Conyers, the oldest African American rep from New York, has stepped down because of allegations against him and him paying off women for what he's done. And what was the not Rush Limbaugh, but the other one, not Rush Limbaugh. Why can't I think of his name? Bill O'Reilly. It was
okay.
The biggest name at Fox. I don't know why I couldn't think of it, but and also very much a hateful human being against anybody who's not far right. And then he paid in August. It was learned that he paid $35 million to one person. Now he had already paid $18 million over, I think, course of some years to several others. But in August, it was revealed that he paid $35 million. So again, this is not something that's small. It was this movement, this rise of women's voices was the cover of Time magazine this year. And I hope that the momentum keeps going. I hope that we're able to get people like our president to be held accountable for their disgusting behavior. And wherever you have a woman in fear of being sexually harassed, that has to stop. And it has to go from the top, but it also we have to think about it in our restaurants industry and just the hotel industry, just places where women are, where it's not as easy for them to sue and be heard. We have to listen to all the voices, from the whispers to the yells.
Right, definitely. I think you're going to just see more and more of this in 2018.
Hope so.
And
not more and more, just more and more of it being held accountable.
Yeah,
to.
more and more women coming out and saying
and
this is not okay. And hopefully we'll see a change in behavior. Mm-hmm. Well, so the other part of our top 10 list, because that was number 6, if you're following us, is kind of what things that we saw that came out that we found especially interesting from the perspective of an African-American women, family, communities of color. And so, of course, NFL versus Trump, or Trump versus NFL players. We had Trump and going to battle with players who chose to take a knee, starting with Colin Kaepernick all the way. And so we know
why did they take a knee? It wasn't just because we were disrespecting the flag. It was not. It was taking a knee to speak up against the disproportionate numbers that African Americans are killed or harassed or beaten by the police without cause. in relation to their white counterparts. That was what it was. Hey, let's look at this. Can we open up a conversation? I'm going to take a knee, which is a peaceful protest, and up until recently had been okay to do if you had an issue. If you had you wanted to silent protest, that was a respectful way to protest the flag. Until Donald J. Trump gets into office, and now he wants sons of bitches to be fired. Who, code word for African Americans, that's what that is, because largely the people who are protesting are African American men. And I'm still protesting the NFL. I have not watched. There's a game on today at 4:45, and it's for the playoffs against the Bengals. Ravens, I'm not watching you. I miss you. But
well, some of the good things though that happened. So you really saw a lot of the players banding together, and really just trying to support Colin, support other players, basically saying they weren't going to be pushed around. Some of the owners were in support of the players expressing their freedom of speech. Some of the owners obviously were not.
Nobody was.
Eventually, though, there was a group of players that were able to get some funding from the owners, the Players Coalition, and they were able. Malcolm Jenkins, so I'd like to shout him out, who is a member of the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
He was able to get a significant amount of funds to support educational programs, social justice programs in urban communities in particular. And so, I think that props to him and to the other players who were willing to take on the criticism of the president, which is ridiculous. Take on the criticism of some fans who thought that players should just play and not have a social conscious or social justice perspective. And so I think that these resources will be utilized hopefully in a way that really helps to educate young men, educate police, bring about other types of programs that help some of the disparities that exist, such as poverty, lack of employment, things like that. So I wanted to just mention that, I think as a result of the protest, as a result of the...
Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job, which is disgusting.
And he's not going to have one, I don't think. I really don't think it's going to happen, But I think Colin Kaepernick is another person who, in a way, like, who even heard of Colin Kaepernick? I didn't. Who even heard of him?
Me?
You're a real fan. I'm not a real fan.
He was in the Super Bowl.
Okay.
He did not win.
That's why I didn't protest, because my protest wouldn't have meant anything, because I have no idea about anything that's happening in football. Except for the Eagles, apparently, they're doing really well this year. But my point is, though, potentially he thought his destiny was to be this major sports figure, and he had that, but he may have so much more that's set up for him as a result of him just taking a stand. I'd love to see this young man go into politics. I'm sure he's already doing some work with foundations, so he's got a bright future whether he gets signed or not. I would love to see him get signed, but hey, also speaking of Black women who were talking politics, Jemele Hill got into it this year with President Trump, or he got into it with her,
and she was suspended for 2 weeks.
She had a tough way to go, because first, she came out and she made some comments, which I think, personally she should have been able to do.
Absolutely.
And then he kind of jumped in there, and then, she wound up coming back out and saying something again.
That's when it was.
Yeah, I think that she should have had the freedom to say whatever she wants to say. However, they did kind of tell her, if you say something, we're going to kind of clap back.
But it's your freedom of speech. And maybe she shouldn't have used her
she had
her ESPN handle. Maybe she should have used her personal Twitter account.
She has to be a different person. She can't be I'm Jemele Hill. She has to be
she can't be Jemele Hill. You should be able to have
JH or something.
Especially with the idiocy that's going on. You should be able to speak about it. We should all be able to speak about it.
Well, it was kind of ridiculous. Again, to me, one of the things that's interesting about this president is how low he's willing to go. Like, most other presidents wouldn't have the time, and Jemele Hill would be like a flea. You know what I mean? He's like, I don't have time for Jemele Hill. I'm the president of the United States. But this man has way too much free time and an unchecked Twitter handle, which is why I think they're trying to pull him. They should really just cut his service.
Yeah, they
and just cut the Wi-Fi.
They won't.
I think that would help. Yeah, well, they won't. No, I actually heard some folks randomly walking up the street yesterday saying, "Do you think the presidents moving forward will be as active on Twitter? Do you think they will be allowed to have Twitter?" And I think, yeah, I definitely. I mean, at this point,
yes,
Twitter is free game.
Yeah.
I think every president will probably be
well,
very
and his
active on
justification for having Twitter is that he has to tell the truth because the fake news media is not going to tell the truth to the country. So that's his justification, which is total BS.
Well, I just think if you're going to use Twitter, really just I
use
think
it responsibly.
Yeah, I just think the level of dialogue needs to go up like a million decibels.
Right.
Instead of us tweeting about like Jamel Hill should be fired, like
Right.
for real, 45. Like, why don't you tweet about like world peace or like something that's really within your realm of like importance,
right?
Something. Anywho, moving on to number 8. I believe this is number 8. We already talked a little bit about the Confederate statues, but that was a big thing this year. Mm-hmm. That was, and like you said, it is kind of the mask that racism wore this year.
Yeah.
Under the guise of preserving history. But we know that not only
That's
was the whole
for preserving white.
Or dominance, white dominance, yeah. Right? And so we know in Charlottesville was about the statue, mm-hmm. and they were, the tiki lights were around the statue. We know in Maryland there were several statues that were removed in the middle of the night to kind of not deal with the drama and the protest, yet and still understanding, what those statues meant. We know that even in D.C., there are several places where there's Confederate statues, Lamont Plaza being one, where folks didn't even really know that there's all these monuments. I know I didn't know that there were all these monuments to the Confederate states.
Yeah.
Right in, we know we were below the Mason-Dixon line, but you don't really feel like you're in the South in D.C., but... so even here in D.C., we've got these monuments to a very dark time in our history.
And I'm not for change. The argument has always been, we don't want to change history. And that's why we have museums. That's why we have books. And if you read, then you don't have to worry about rushing to your favorite statue, which I don't think any of these people were doing. Nobody's running to their favorite statue to look at it and say, oh, my God, this is such a time in history. You will never... in Germany, I don't believe, see a swastika. It's not going to happen. You will not have it unless it's in a museum, a Holocaust museum. They're not going to have anything or any Adolf Hitler or any of his generals, being having a monument after them. It's not going to happen because it was a horrible time in their history, and they respect and understand that that's what it was. And so you put that in the museum, you put that in the books, you talk about it and talk about how bad it was. But our country, we are not able to do that. We're like, the Roy Moores, where it was a little bit of slavery. It was bad in slavery, but it was good in slavery. There are certain things that it's just bad.
It's bad. And I misspoke. The statue of General Pike is actually at Judiciary Square.
Okay.
So if you want to go and oppose a Confederate statue in D.C., go to Judiciary Square,
yep.
Look for General Pike, and chant, tear down.
Tear down.
So the other thing that I felt, we really talked a lot about, we really didn't talk as much about it in 2017. It was, in 2016, It was a lot of, we had a lot of men that died at the hands of police brutality that were publicized. Because we know in 2017, a lot of men died at the hands of police brutality as well. But they just didn't hit the headlines, right? Yeah. So Philando Castile was one of those folks, who died right on Facebook Live.
Yep.
And so many people just watched him,
be murdered
in front of his child and his girlfriend. And so it was really very traumatizing. And so the verdict came down this year, and the police officer who shot him was found not guilty. And so we know he was also acquitted of 2 counts of intentional discharge. So he just walked away. He walked away while this man and his family's lives are forever changed. And so, of course, this just again continue to underscore the injustice that we feel our young black men face in terms of when they are doing the right thing, like this man was, which was disclosing that he had a firearm. You still get shot, and it just continues to underscore how it just feels. So many people feel like the odds are stacked against you.
This is the knee. Philando Castile is why the Colin Kaepernick decided to start protesting. He and his like young men, African American men who lost their lives ridiculously at the hands of police officers for no other reason than being black.
And there's lack of justice. I mean, so it wasn't just that folks lose their life,
right.
but then when you put the data up, it gets, somehow it gets made as if the man himself was at fault and the police officer was perfectly reasonable. Right. And of course it's frustrating.
Well, it's the assumed fear, right? The assumed fear. That's what the police officer said. They assumed, and so how do you quantify that? How do you say that no, you didn't? If the police officer is saying I assumed, then you can, because of that assumed fear, you can act. And so which is devastating for anybody who is black or a black male, because the assumed fear is not a weapon, it is your skin color. So the police officers have their assumption, their fear is based off of what you look like and not what you may have or what you actually may do. And so that's the problem. And that's where things have to shift.
Yep. So that was a definite discouraging moment in 2017. That was one of those moments where you just felt very defeated, And so I think that we've got to do better. Mm-hmm. So actually, this is number 11. So I think I think I miscounted, but
that's okay. There was so much. I was gonna say I don't know.
We'll run it all through again at the very end. But the last thing that we were really stressed out about, I guess, in 2017 was DACA, and just how President Trump ordered the end of this very important program that was launched during the Obama era that shielded young undocumented immigrants from deportation. And he basically said that he was going to phase this out in 6 months, which March 2018 is going to be the 6th month. Mm-hmm. And basically, and 800,000 young adults will be eligible for deportation starting in March.
And that's ridiculous, because these people who are here, I mean, they are not felons. They are working. They're in school. They got here. The mean age when they got here was 6, and they were here.
These are the dreamers.
The dreamers. And how do you tell people who don't have a life anywhere else that you have to go make a life somewhere else when you are just starting your life? Because some of them are still, are children.
Yeah, many of these are children.
Right.
I mean, they're under 18. That's what makes them eligible, know? And so I think this is one of those things where you talk about what 2018 has to bring forward. It has to bring forward some type of resolution to this situation, because right now you have almost 1 million people that are vulnerable in March of this year if something doesn't happen. And for the Republicans to try, what they try to do sometimes is make this be the bargaining chip for
everything else,
other things that they want, like tax reform or whatever. And we're talking about the lives. And some of the articles that I've been seeing about these detention centers that they're setting up for people who are coming in illegally, in terms of the way that they're treating folks, it's very inhumane. And and this is basically what we're talking about when we're setting somebody up to be deported. We're talking about putting them into these types of, basically, to me, they remind me of concentration camps, really. And then, putting them back. And if you read some of the articles, it's just a really cruel approach, because what they're saying is, well, if we show them how cruelly we'll treat these children if they come here, if they're unaccompanied, then this will discourage parents from sending their children in the first place. And guess what? They were saying some of this stuff is working. Yeah. Right now you have less people coming to this country, which is unfortunate, because it's not good for industry and for our economy in terms of folks need, we need to have diverse workforce. We need to have all types of folks in the workforce. And so I just think that this DACA piece needs to be addressed quickly. We have so many young dreamers that are here that came here not as a result of their own actions that will be facing deportation if there isn't some type of action. And needs to be a bipartisan issue. These are children.
They don't care.
These are children. Well, this is something that has to. I think that there are some people that care and they need to step up and have some guts and step out in front of their party and say, I will stand up for children. It's, you want to stand up for children when
that's the same party who was behind Ray Moore. We got to think that children are not the priority. You're the same party. You're talking about let's take care of children. They were okay with
this is also the pro-life party. So what is it?
No, they're pro-life while you're in the stomach. When you get out of the stomach, that's on you. That's it.
Wait a minute.
That's it. While you're in the stomach.
If you're pro-life, then you're supposed to be pro-children.
They are no. I am pro until you are born, and then I will take every resource you need. I will deprive you of every humane thing that you might need. Oh, I feel like Puerto Rico. We got to talk about Puerto Rico.
Oh, that's what we skipped. Right. That's what we skipped. Somehow I'm like, how did I get to 8 and then 10 and then, well, hey. Puerto Rico is exactly.
As of December 31st, 2017, over 500,000 are still without electricity. The official death count is 64, but the governor has insisted that it is well into the hundreds, which we all believe and know. And so, again, what does Puerto Rico have in common with why it's being ignored? It's brown, because it is a United States territory. There's no reason why it shouldn't get the same thing that Texas got or Florida got or any other place that where there was a hurricane this year. But the deciding factor is that most of the people in Puerto Rico are brown. Most of the people in Puerto Rico are Democrat. And this president is very partial to white people who vote for him. And that is not what Puerto Rico looks like, and that's not what Puerto Rico sounds like. And so... And I doubt that when it first happened, he even knew that Puerto Rico was a U.S. territory. So I want to make sure that we keep, because the problem with this president and this presidency is that horrific things happen so fast and so all the time that we forget, or things are coming at us that Puerto Rico can now go down here because that happened in September, but these people still don't have still don't have electricity, and they're still struggling. And so we need to keep everything in the forefront. And we forgot Puerto Rico, but we could still talk. We could have still talk about the health bill. That was a win for us. That didn't happen. But the tax bill that did, and there's so many things that happened this year that were crucial to who we are as a country.
Keeping it in the top 10 is basically impossible. Because it was a losing year, as they say,
and not in a good way. Not in a good way. We have shown the world that we are the arrogant Americans that they thought we were.
But. It was a tough year, but I think, again, if we just run through our list, with the Women's March, that was a bright spot. We know that Doug Jones, that was a bright spot.
Yes.
Where Trump versus the NFL, although it was whack, it still, in some ways, it still worked out for resources that are coming to the community. So I don't know. I guess that's three out of 11. So.
I'll say 2.5.
That's 3 out of 11, but.
I guess Me Too is a bright spot in that through tragedy, people are now, the light is being shined on this horrible thing that has been pushed under the rug for so long. So in that respect, I feel like when we're taking down these powerful men who are abusing women, that's a bright spot. Hopefully we are now going to be able to empower women to speak and have a voice, and also to make it so that men, and raise men that don't do this, because we shouldn't do it.
So here's our top 10 list, which is really 12 or maybe 13. For a recap, we've got the Women's March, we've got
Muslim ban,
right? We've got Comey Mueller investigation, we have Charlottesville, we have Doug Jones. We have Me Too. We have NFL versus Trump, including the Jamel Hill whole drama. Right. Puerto Rico, the Confederate statues, Philando Castile, and the ending of DACA. So those are just some of what we would say were the highlights and lowlights of 2017. One other thing, just to bring some laughs to the table before we close out. We learned like a whole lot of new words in 2017.
Or how to use these words, right? They weren't necessarily, we learned how to use them. Yeah,
I didn't even know these words existed. So, and we'll just kind of go through the new vocabulary list and see how you can use these words throughout 2018, just for fun. Like for instance, alternative facts. I'm going to shout out Kellyanne Conway for that.
For the lies, which means lie.
That came out with the whole inauguration. We've had the biggest crowds ever. And Kellyanne Conway said, when Sean Spicer said that, he was just giving some alternative facts.
Which is a lie. He was lying through his teeth, children.
So, we've I think for real this year has been a year of alternative facts.
Oh, yeah, we're an alternative universe.
Then we had the famous unmasking. I'd like to shout out Susan Rice for that. That's our Black Women Talk Politics hero in some ways, Susan Rice got a lot of flack for unmasking the names of those Americans who were being watched by the intelligence community for possible collusion with Russia. So unmasking was the word earlier this year. Then we had one of the most famous words of the year, reconciliation. So none of us, except for like political wonks, I guess, before this year.
Reconciliation? No, we reconcile.
I mean, we knew the word reconcile, like in a regular way, like, but not in the political way.
Right, not in the way, right. I was, all of this is being twisted and turned into the Trump. This is the Trump era of how these words are being used.
Oh, really, Mitch McConnell,
Well, it's the Trump era. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's not him, but it's the era. He is now making it acceptable for people to twist and turn and use words and language in a way that we have never thought of using it because we're good and honest people.
Well, right, and bipartisan by nature. But reconciliation is the legislative process of the United States Congress that allows expedited passage of certain budgetary legislation on spending revenues and the federal debt limit with a simple majority vote. Both in the House, which is 218 votes, and of course we know what the Senate number is, 51. We've studied that number hard this year. Then there was the Rocket Man,
which was funny,
which was
and sad and scary.
Trump's word for Kim
because we didn't even put in North Korea, which we could all be killed. I mean, that was didn't even make top 12. You see how crazy it is? The nuclear war possibility did not make top 12.
Right. It was really actually. The Vegas shooting, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but that didn't make, there's so much stuff that happened this year. The hurricanes, all everything. 3 of them, or then there was all kinds of little ones, But anyway, what was
Dotard?
Okay.
The old poop,
if which you is ever, that is just
the best word because we all feel like President Trump is old and he is becoming senile. I totally agree with
Kim Jong-un's lash back.
That was his flash.
Or maybe did he start off with Dotard and then he went
Rocket
to
Man? No, he had been doing Rocket Man and then he hit Dotard, which was great.
And then, of course, we all learned what a bump stock was, and we learned about that in the saddest way possible.
Yeah.
As a result of the shooting in Las Vegas, which was deadly because of the use of a bump stock, which turns a semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic weapon. And, unfortunately, we didn't even talk about how, even with the worst mass shooting in American history, we still have not had any gun legislation
passed
and regulations
or even
passed.
Probably. Yeah.
It's just like everyone is just like, oh, that's so sad. Moving on. And which is incredible.
Which is what the NRA loves for situations like they love this year because anytime there's something, even with the shooting at the Texas church, the NRA is banking that with this president, things are going to be rushed over so that people are going to forget about the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history. People are going to forget about this guy walking into a church and killing a third of a town. That's what people are going to forget because this is the alternative world that we're living in.
So, 2017. Well, it was full of events.
Right. And here we are.
But here we are on the eve of a new year.
And we got to send a shout out to our producer, Lamont. We have to say thank you for all of
Lamont.
your contributions.
Thank you. So, as most people do on the eve of a new year, you've got to bring forward what your hopes are for the next year, your intentions.
And resolution, or yes. What are my, I don't know that I may. I'm going to get an actual 9-to-5 job this year. What that looks like, I don't know, but my children are too old for me now to be like, I'm still a stay-at-home mom. They could actually probably survive a weekend by themselves if I left them. So I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to be more patient and more open, and give the love that I want to receive.
That's great. I think I'm still working on mine, but one goal I have is definitely to read more. I want to be more well read. I think just kind of getting a better sense of how different people think, and and the strength and resilience that people have tapped into to move through challenges in their life, and finding inspiration in that. That's going to be one of my goals. I think also to continue to be in the know of what's happening. I think, continuing to be a voice for our community is really important. I'm so happy and honored to be able to dive into what's going on and then share it out with whoever chooses to listen to us, and just kind of give some perspective, some levity, but also just, helping people stay in the know of what's going on. What we know is going to happen if we keep doing this is that when the 2018 elections come up, folks will know what's been going on, and then folks will make a choice about where they want to see themselves in the future and the future of our country. So I commit to continuing with sharing as much information as I can about what's going on politically in our country, and particularly from the lens point of African-American woman who loves politics.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Happy New Year, y'all.
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year, Sabria. Happy New Year, Lamont. All right.
See you next year.
2018.